think most people look at my board and they're like, that's your team?
Yeah.
But I want to feel like I won that draft. And usually that comes down to how many players was I able to get at value. And it's hard to do that in the early rounds because the early rounds are pretty much set.
Yeah.
Like people go through the first couple rounds and say, oh, I love, you got CMC,
you can do it in sleep,
you got
honestly.
Antonio Gibson. Like, you're going to see a lot of teams like that. I mean, there are only so many variations that you're going to get, and some of those players are going to get injured, some of those players are going to underperform, some of them are going to overperform. To me, it's those mid to late round picks. That's where we study. And that is one thing we do constantly on the group chat.
Yeah.
We study draft boards.
Yeah.
We study it like we taking the test.
I said, God, give me a warning. Please take me for the morning so I leave more disappointments than I ever will appoint.
I can't believe that we're starting on a week in which one of the biggest fantasy targets actually went on national television and said that he wants out, which just doesn't happen in the NFL. But as a novice fantasy football player, I want to ask the experts, what do y'all do with that? Because I know that Julio is on everybody's big board. He's one of the top receivers in the league. How do you address him wanting to be out? And how do you then fade either Matt Ryan or Pitts or Ridley? Or do you even fade them? Like, how do you address the Julio situation?
So, I mean, I think the news in general, when you sort of kind of approach news like this, it's always best to sort of kind of be ahead of it, to kind of have anticipated this. So for us, we've always kind of been under the assumption that Julio was getting traded. Kind of understanding the, team dynamics from a contract and money situation, reading through some of the tea leaves, and just kind of just generally following the news throughout the offseason, it was sort of kind of hard to not be aware of this situation. So, yes, him kind of going on Undisputed and talking with Shannon Sharp, we can talk about that whole situation, but him going on and saying what he said, I was honestly, it didn't move the needle one way or the other. I think, when you initially told me about the idea of Julio no longer being a Falcon, I said, that's highly unlikely is what I think I said. I think I used that exact term. That is highly unlikely. And then, we do what we normally do. Somebody comes out with the take. We don't just want hot takes. We need some form of evidence, some form of analysis, some form of data to try and back it up. So then came a barrage of tweets, information regarding contracts, various articles, and basically what it came down to was they weren't going to be able to sign their drafted rookies. They were in a cap situation where they were literally not going to be able to sign Julio. It was either Julio or Grady. And given the age of Julio, given that he's a wide receiver, given how much time he's missed.
Injury history.
Exactly. Given that they have Calvin Ridley, that they just drafted Kyle Pitts. And then given that it's a new regime, new head coach, new OC coming in and wanting to sort of kind of set their own blueprint or establish their own imprint on this team and this offense, to me, it was just way more likely that he was going to get removed or get moved and get traded than that he was going to. So to me, the news honestly wasn't all that surprising.
For me, well, first off, we're definitely not experts on any of this stuff. So
No,
we're just fans.
Not at all.
Fans that play fantasy football.
Absolutely.
But y'all have won. Wait. Let's not do that. Y'all have won hundreds of thousands of dollars in fantasy football.
No.
They don't need to know. They don't need to know the exact amount.
I want the inside details. What do you do with Ridley and Kyle Pitts if Julio is gone?
So first off, the way I approach all stuff, and like you were saying, when I was first telling him I thought Julio might get traded, he was saying, he was kind of not really in belief of that. But so me, when I look at fantasy football and football in general, I always like to try to put all options on the table, like every single option on the table, whether it's likely or unlikely. Just the fact that it is an option, there's an avenue to it. I want to be aware of it because I want to be prepared for what might occur if that happens. And like you said, kind of get ahead of the field. So when you look at things that are, we can even use this term unlikely. When you look at things like that, that means the way things are set up, and we use ADP, draft boards, you see out where people pick. That means the ADPs are reflecting how people expect things to be, which is going to be at that time nobody expected Julio to be traded. So everybody's value was like, okay, this is the value of Julio is not traded. So I don't need to really think too much of what if Julio stays, because if Julio stays, it's status quo. But I didn't think, okay, what if Julio leaves? What happens? That changes things. Somebody's going to go up. Somebody might go down, X, Y, and Z. I now start having my mind kind of think through all that stuff, because that's me kind of getting ahead of the field, because, I can draft as is now and everybody's going to do the same thing. But if Julio's gone, Ridley's probably going to go up. Pitts will probably go up. So they're going to be values. They're going to be values where they're taken now compared to where they'll be once Julio is gone. So that's really why in our group chat, I'm always kind of throwing things out there like that. Like, hey, this is a whisper. This is a possibility. What's up? So if Julio is moved, the ADPs is going to make Ridley and Pitts go up. The question is, the place that they end up, is it worth it? Is their value increase really that necessary by them losing Julio? Yeah. And that could be a philosophical question, because, and like we were saying earlier, it's one of those things where, okay, we can look at it as Julio's been there. With Julio there, everybody's kind of put their attention on Julio, whether double teaming him, bracketing him, just watch what Julio does, and then leaving the other coverage. You only have so many defensive players on the field.
Right.
So you put in the lighter coverage over really. Julio gone, now you don't have anybody you have to focus on, double team or bracket. You can take that same coverage and put it on Julio, especially with really doing so well. And then the question is, will Willie still be able to produce, or does that now depress his outcomes, or what he's able to do? And me personally, I think Ridley's talented enough to where he'll still be able to produce.
And I agree. I think it honestly comes down to, how talented do you think Calvin Ridley is? If you think he is sort of kind of in the tier of Juju, then just as in the years previous with Antonio Brown leaving and Juju sort of kind of
that's my fear.
Yeah, the regression that we saw with Juju, or his difficulties with seeing sort of kind of or being the primary attention and focus of defenses. But for me, I'm in agreement with Dayo. I think Calvin Ridley is in a different tier. I think he is an excellent wide receiver. He may not be the fastest and most explosive, but I think he's an excellent route runner, an excellent technician. I think he gets open. To me, that's kind of the number one thing that I look at a wide receiver. Can you get open?
Right. Route running is
yeah.
So good,
And he has rapport built in with Matt Ryan. Other thing you need to take into account is the OC and the head seat. So we bring over Arthur Smith, and I'm someone who trusts Arthur Smith. I love what he did in Tennessee, and so I'm not worried about him kind of leaving Ridley on the outside and having him run 9 and post routes, and or being running routes that are very predictable for the defenses to anticipate. I see him moving him around, being very creative. I see him understanding that he's one of his better offensive players and putting him in position to succeed. So when I look at the vacated targets, the increased attention that Calvin really will get, I'm not overly concerned about. So again, going back to our original point, we had already sort of kind of felt that Julio was on the move anyway, and so I was drafting Calvin Ridley accordingly. So for me, Calvin Ridley was a early third round, ideally, but a potentially late second round pick.
But I think with that trade, it might end up moving him to early second. If that happens, I'm not sure if I'm ready to take him there, honestly.
Yeah, and so and that's one of the advantages, sort of kind of playing through all the different scenarios and having a good sense of where things may fall ahead of time, because you can take advantage of that before the field does. So now I think the more interesting question is Kyle Pitts, because when we're talking about Calvin Ridley,
everybody's favorite tight end.
Excuse me. Calvin Ridley is only moving a few spots ADP wise, maybe half a round at most. Kyle Pitts, there still may not be that much room to move. He's already kind of going in the mid to late third rounds.
I think he could jump a couple rounds from that news.
But Kyle Pitts is an interesting question. So full disclosure, you were the first one to sort of kind of, I think, be on the Kyle Pitts bandwagon from a dynasty standpoint.
From a dynasty,
from a dynasty
standpoint,
prospect. From a long, so he's the first one who's like, man, you need to be,
because
you
at
need
the
to be aware of
time,
this guy.
most casual NFL fans, it's hard for them to fathom a tight end being not only drafted that high, but also producing much in their first year. It just doesn't happen historically. Even the greatest prospects, you have Eric Ebron, Vernon Davis, even as a recent T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant. They're all good. They've all produced, but none of them have produced at a high ceiling where you will look back and be like, dang, I wish I would have took them super early. While Kyle Pitts, and I used to tell people this all the time, Kyle Pitts I looked at as almost like a Megatron version of the tight end.
Oh, that's lofty expectation.
I know. And I
that's what
every
my
time I
eyes
was
were
saying,
like,
I would be like, what am I saying? But really, that's what I was saying. But that's what I was saying. I was seeing a Megatron type prospect at the tight end position. And when you see something like that, he now becomes a unicorn. We've never seen this before. So I can't take what I've seen in the history and put it on him because he's now a different breed. So I didn't know where I would have him value out, but I knew he was going to be valued very high. Yeah. But again, this is before anybody was really even paying attention.
Are you taking him where he's being drafted right now?
No, I'm not. I can't, because again, for me, for tight end, if it's not going to be the very top guys, and for me, the very top guys are Kelsey, Waller, and maybe Kittle. I'm kind of
so
wavering.
Still on the Kittle bandwagon.
Kittle, talent-wise and ability, I mean, I guess that's the
probably
same thing, but
league,
he's great at it. But I feel like the team wants to utilize his blocking skills a lot, and I've seen games where they will let him block the whole game.
He's volatile.
And he's great at that.
He will disappear.
So they're not worried about him catching passes. So he's still having a great game, but for fantasy purposes, it's not benefiting us.
He's in an offense where everybody eats.
Right.
You're the third running back on the roster, and you may eat that.
So I'm not sure I want to have him. I'm not sure how high I have him now, but still, he's still top 3 for me.
Where would you take Kyle Pitts in FFPC?
Right
tight
now?
end premium.
Like today?
Today.
Like after or round? Like between
round-wise,
I would take him in the 5th round.
Okay.
Comfortably.
So you're never going to have Kyle
He's
Pitts.
never going to be around.
Okay, so let me give the pro argument for Kyle Pitts. And you kind of have already made my discussion for me in a number of ways. He's a unicorn. Not Chris Herndon type, but an actual unicorn. No tight end has ever been drafted 4th overall or as high as he's been drafted. Very few, if any, have sort of kind of come out with his athletic grade. His hands, his route running, for the size that he is and for the position that he plays, I think is just elite beyond.
I agree.
Beyond anything that I personally have ever seen.
I agree.
Everyone knows that, okay? If it were that alone, I would be in agreement with you. I would have 0 Kyle Pitts. In full disclosure, I have 0 Kyle Pitts right now. I'm still, it's tough for me to pull that trigger in the 3rd round. I don't think I'm there yet. But here's some things that may push me over the edge. Or if I see him in the 4th round, may allow me to click that button. One, again, and I'm so big on this, going back to the head coach, offensive coordinator, this is a coaching staff that I trust based off of what I've seen in the past. I trust that they're going to take their players and put them in the best positions to succeed. Right. It's funny, when you watch our Texans play, it's a struggle. We have a great quarterback, but it's a struggle. Our Watson is out there just making unbelievable, incredible plays. Then when you watch Kansas City Chiefs play, it's almost like it's with ease. Guys are running wide open, Kelsey, literally, if you're ever playing against Kelsey and you watch the Kansas City Chiefs play that given week, I mean, you may have a heart attack. You're going to be having some stressful moments because you're going to be asking yourself, he is Travis Kelce. Why is he this wide open? How is he this wide open? And it comes down to play calling, not just the actual plays themselves, but the play calling. It's almost like they're playing chess out there, 3-dimensional chess. So I trust this. I trust this offensive coordinator. I trust this. This coaching class. And then we get to the vacated targets. And again, that kind of gets us back into our original question, which is, okay, does Julio leaving help or hurt Kyle Pitts? I think in this particular situation, the amount of targets that are gone and the need for someone to fill not just the role of, okay, who we're going to throw the ball to, but to fill the role of, okay, who are our go-to guys? I think Kyle Pitts is going to have to be that guy. He just fits the bill. So it's going to take a lot for a rookie, and I don't want to view him as just a tight end because I don't think he's going to be in line. I don't think he's going to be blocking a lot, and I think they're going to be splitting him out. I think they're going to be doing a lot of creative different things with him. It's going to take a lot, but I think, we may see a situation where, he holds up value in the third and fourth round. The problem for me is that may be his ceiling.
Right.
It's going to take a lot. It's going to take 70 plus catches. It's going to take 800 plus yards, and it's going to take 8 to 9 plus TDs. And that's a lot asking for a rookie in a new system, a new coaching staff. Granted, I trust them, but it's still first year, so it's going to take a lot.
So here's why I have reservations on Pitts. Talent-wise, I agree with you. Probably one of the most talented, if not the most talented tight end even right now in the NFL. I have no argument with that. But with all things of fantasy, we've seen players we feel like are extremely talented, have all the ability in the world, but they're not utilized the way we think they should be utilized, or they're not getting the targets that we think they should be getting. And like you're saying, you trusted the OC and the vacated. Yes, that's all
It's wishful
in
thinking.
theory.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
But we haven't seen it.
We haven't seen it.
Oh, and you even mentioned the other person that you used to refer to as a unicorn, tight end.
Chris Herndon.
Yeah. Everybody used to talk about how talented he was.
But I never trusted that.
But people were drafting him with the thought that he has this talent, this ability. His first year, he actually did pretty well. Let's draft him because, in theory, he should be great fantasy-wise.
And his ADP was much more palatable than a Kyle Pitts in the third round.
Yes.
So let me leave you with this, though, with Kyle Pitts.
Okay.
Let me just interject real quick. Imagine Falcons have no issues getting in the red zone. I think with when you have a competent quarterback in a good elite wide receiver, and I do think Calvin really is that. I think getting up and down the field is not going to be an issue. But when you get to the goal line, punching scoring touchdowns as opposed to kicking field goals becomes challenging based on the play caller and based on the player personnel.
Right.
When I look at Kyle Pitts, to me, he seems like the ultimate red zone weapon.
I agree.
Just think back to think back to what Arthur Smith did with Jonnu Smith at the goal line and all the creative ways that he utilized him. Think to the fact that there really is not there's not a goal line back per se on the Falcons currently.
I got you.
I like Mike Davis, but he's not a true goal line back. So they're going to have to get creative down there. And you just drafted this guy 4th overall. This is something that he excels at. Why
so you're not
wouldn't
buying
you?
the Mike Davis picture that was released?
The thighs?
Right.
No.
My question.
Pics. I see pics like that, and I just,
So my question to you is,
unfollow.
how would you feel if Kyle Pitts had the exact same season statistic-wise as Jonnu last year? Would you feel like he's worth that 3rd round pick?
Oh, absolutely not. But I don't think he's going to be Jonnu.
Right, but what I'm saying is,
Jonnu could block, and Jonnu was needed to block.
Right,
and
but
Tennessee
Jonnu,
needed Jonnu last year due to the offensive line issues to block.
Right, but Jonnu still had a good season receiving-wise for a tight end to some extent, successful-wise. I mean, he's still considered a good tight end.
But he was not worth the 3rd or 4th round pick.
Right, so if Pitts had that type of season, it was still football-wise, NFL-wise, be to some extent considered a good season.
Yeah.
But fantasy-wise, that's not really what we would think we would be getting from our 3rd round pick.
Yeah.
And again, he's still young. He still has to grow. He still has to learn the offense.
And again, we only care about this year.
And I'm playing devil's advocate here because right now I currently have 0 shares. But again, I'm getting closer to the point where if he's there in the 4th round, I will consider it.
I guess I'll say it like this then. With the more teams I draft, the more likely I would probably say, okay, let me go ahead and draft
It's
him.
just so hard. I think we talk about this all the time, There are certain players where, like, the hype train is just unreal, and it may be warranted because it's within that player's realm of possibilities. But at some point, like, at least my philosophy and the way that I draft, I'm okay not having those players on my team.
Right.
I don't have FOMO when it comes to that. Crypto, we both know I got some FOMO.
That's
yeah, that's a whole other topic.
That's right.
Right.
But when it comes to like these hype players, I'm okay. I don't need to have like, the number one overall scorer on my team because I've seen in the past, and we go back historically and look at, whether it's a, home league or, these large field tournaments, you don't need that number one overall player at their respective positions to win. You can win without that. So those rounds are extremely important. I want players with stable floors and with upside. I
don't even
both.
want to call them safe, though. I don't want to call my players at that point safe. I want to call them where I'm extremely confident that they're going to produce.
Absolutely.
I don't want a floor. I want to know I have a good chance of hitting ceilings.
So I would much rather have CeeDee Lamb, Allen Robinson,
right?
Even a Robert Woods. All of those guys, I would much rather prefer over a Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, and that's where they're going. And I think that's part of the reason. Like, if you take Pitts, you're not going to be able to take other players that I probably like as much, if not more, that I don't want to miss out on. So
how early are you taking tight ends, though? I mean, you don't want to take a Kelsey in the first round because he's not making it back to you in the second round. How early are you taking a tight end?
If I'm drafting back end of the first and Kelsey falls to me, I'm taking Kelsey easily. And actually, this season thus far, I've seen Kelsey go even as high as the second, third overall pick. Yep. Now, I personally am probably not going to draft him that early because I still kind of prefer my C-Max, my Dalvins, my Camaras. But, I mean, just kind of depend. I mean, it's a fluid situation, honestly, with all these tight ends. Just kind of, I mean, I think he does it too. Kind of let the draft come to you. Yeah. So you don't go in saying, I want a tight end early. So first round, I'm getting my tight end. Whoever falls to me, that's what I'm going to get. But if Kelsey was to fall to me, then, hey, I got my tight end. Yeah. Now let's keep it moving to my other position.
And there's there's some advantages. So we'll go into our tight end philosophy because I think it's one that's very unique. I got to give Dayo credit, all the credit in the world. I think the last 3 to 4 years, he's just absolutely crushed, picking that tight end that's come out of nowhere, whether it's been Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, last year Logan Thomas, and that has like literally led to tremendous fantasy success, especially in these tight end premium formats. So, but kind of getting back to like when we like to draft them, it's tough to kind of pull that trigger in the first 2 rounds, but if I am, and I have, it's going to be Kelsey or Waller for me. I think we've kind of talked about Kittle being, great player. And at the end of the year, you're going to look at his overall stats and see he got there, but it's very volatile. So he may put up a 40-pointer, and then he may have some kind of, 5 to 10 pointers in a tight end premium format that, to me, is not the ideal for a player going in the first round or at the back end of the second round. Mm-hmm. Kelsey, though, he's just sort of kind of been that stable tight end one year in and year out.
Right.
We may see some TD regression, but we know we're getting 300-plus fantasy points year in and year out, and that just sort of kind of gives you a significant advantage over the field. What other people also don't talk about, especially in these sort of kind of large bench or large roster leagues, is that getting a player like that early allows you to sort of kind of completely forget about tight ends, honestly. Mm-hmm. I'm under the mindset that if Kelsey gets injured, I'll figure out a situation. I'll figure things out throughout the course of the season. But for the most part, he is locked in my tight end slot throughout the year. And then I'm not even addressing that position until very late in the draft where I'm taking a lot of just sort of kind of these, deep sleeper type picks. So that to me is a huge advantage when it comes to drafting. Okay. Obviously you have to kind of pass on a high end running back, which is tough, but you get that advantage. I get to take Kelsey and I get to forget about it. And Kelsey in the first is to me a much better value than a Kittle in the second, Waller in the back end of the first, definitely than a Kyle Pitts in the third, then a TJ Hawkinson in the fourth, and even better than the Goddards, the Logan Thomases, and all those guys that go in the 5th and 6th round. I'd rather spend that first on Kelsey.
Waller's starting to kind of get up there a little bit for me, man.
He is. He's there. He's there. But he's
still not there with Kelsey, but he's pushing.
The difference is his quarterback.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference. Like, I love Waller as a talent, and I have taken him. I think I have a couple teams with Waller thus far, but Kelsey to me is elite. So
it's so hard because we were taking Keller Kelsey back.
I know
Waller back in the day, like,
but
in
you gotta,
9th round, like
you gotta disregard.
Like, he was there, like, just say now first.
This is 2021. Everything else you just got to completely disregard when it comes to previous ADPs, because you hear it all the time. Oh, this player was a value back then. We were taking him then. Now he's rise. Well, now it may be warranted now. So probably it's rare that I'm taking the tight end that early. Maybe if I said 5% of my team, 10% of my teams. Usually I'm kind of trying to load up on running backs that early, or if we lock in on a wide receiver like we did Devontae Adams, taking them that early. Someone truly elite.
Man, we were locked in. We talked about that, right?
Oh yeah. We were locked in on Devontae last year.
Nobody else saw that.
Yeah, I think people saw it, but I just don't know if people were wanting to take him 7th, 6th overall. So we kind of had a certain cutoff, and this year that I've kind of floated the idea around that. To me, I've kind of tiered off my running backs, where I'm at, in no particular order, but looking at CMC, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, but he may find his way out of that list. We'll see. Kamara and Saquon. I'm a believer in Saquon. I know people are kind of off that bandwagon. And then Kelsey, and then after that, I think there's a drop-off at running backs, and we can maybe throw Derrick Henry. Some days he's in there, some days he's out. But then after that.
You've had, I'll let you say the name.
Yeah. But after that, I'm looking at Tyreek Hill.
Right. So you've had Tyreek Hill basically jump Zeke now. When leading up to this point, we pretty much still had Zeke.
I do like Zeke, but we going on a tangent. We're gonna get to Zeke. I do like Zeke, but I want to get to Zeke. But in terms of getting back to like the tight end, I don't like drafting tight ends in those middle rounds. Those rounds 3 through 6 to me are so critical and so important. That is your starting roster. That is your stronghold. That's your rock. That's what you're ride or die throughout the season. I don't want to take a random guess at a position that has a high rate of failure. Right. That's a tight end dead zone. Historically, that area does not do very well when we try and determine who's gonna be the next Darren Waller or Mark Andrews. Right. We've done a very bad job at it. It doesn't mean that we can't attempt it, but we've done also a better job at finding guys a lot later on.
Late. So
I'd rather, get guys. I don't want to pass on an OBJ in the 6th. I don't want to pass on a Tyler Lockett in the 6th to take a guess on whether or not Logan Thomas is going to repeat, whether or not Goddard's going to come through. I'd rather just, take my chances and draft those guys later after I've kind of filled up my roster and gotten some core guys like Robbie Anderson, guys that can really kind of, I know will help me out throughout the season.
Well, let's start talking about teams and their philosophies, their systems, head coaching changes, offensive coordinator changes. How does that factor into how you evaluate players at the beginning of the season?
It's significant, but it's just another piece of the puzzle for me. Honestly, I prioritize talent over everything. I'm one of those cream rise to the top type people. But when they do make changes, what I really look for is this coach going to shift the philosophy of the team, making them more pass heavy or more run heavy? That's really kind of how I look at it mostly, because that then for me increases opportunities for certain players compared to the prior years. Right. So let's say, for instance, the Falcons we're talking about. And I know we've kind of alluded to Mike Davis a little bit. But I do feel like the Falcons are probably going to run a lot more this year than they did last year. Just because the coach came from the Titans. Now, y'all know Derrick Henry is a beast, so it might be one of those chicken and the egg things where they ran a lot because they had Henry. But still, the Falcons for the past 3-4 years, they've pretty much been throwing all day long. I mean, Matt Ryan, 40 pass attempts plus every game. Yeah. This year, I feel like they're not going to pass as much volume-wise. And so it kind of goes back when we were talking about Pitts, is those vacated targets. Yes, there's going to be vacated targets, but is the pie going to be as big as it was before, when they were throwing a lot more? I don't know. But if you were to ask me, if I was to say, would the pie become bigger or smaller, I would probably lean smaller just because of the change in the coach. So that's kind of how I more look at it. I kind of also look at if they hire a coach that's kind of been bland or vanilla in the past. I don't like that. If they're bland or vanilla, I'm like, just scratch them out. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not doing anything for the players. You're then leaning on the players to make all the plays themselves. Like you were saying about the Chiefs, I want a coach or a coordinator that's going to scheme his players open, scheme his players into success, because that makes it easier for everybody. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I kind of look at. But he's actually more so looks at coaches more than me. So, you know.
I mean, I think it's absolutely – I mean, I think it's critical. I think it's extremely important. We talk about it all the time. I think, you know, when we see sort of kind of – and this kind of gets into sort of kind of another debate, you know, analytics versus just sort of kind of film watching. And I think there's room for both. I think you have to incorporate both.
I don't even know why there's an
argument. But one thing that I do sort of kind of fight back against is like pulling and drawing from old data from an old head coaching or old offensive coordinating regime. To me, it's almost irrelevant. So I think anytime there's a new head coach and OC coming in, it is absolutely important that you go back and look at their history. It is by no means the end-all, be-all, because we can be fooled. We can assume that a player coming from a certain type of system, especially if it's a newer offensive coordinator, you know, someone who's, you know, maybe it's their first time, you know, in that particular coordinating position. We can, you know, sometimes we kind of falsely assume that they're going to, you know, basically take from the previous OC, you know, somebody who comes from the Shanahan system. Oh, for instance, you know, the New York Jets system. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, he's going to basically pull from the Shanahan system. And it's going to be exactly like that. Well, we really don't know. Mm-hmm. We can kind of make that assumption, but in that particular situation, I'm not going to go, you know, I'm not going to have this strong conviction that it's going to be exactly the same system.
Right.
But in someone like Arthur Smith, you know, same type of situation, but kind of, well, a different situation, but I'm approaching it from a different angle and from a standpoint. I don't think that he's necessarily bringing over the same system, but I trust that offensive coordinator. You know, I feel like he's going to put his players in positions to succeed.
Do you know what he coached before he was the offensive coordinator? I need to look it up right now. Like, he was a position coach on the side.
I want to say he was a tight end coach, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think, but I think each team, I think it's extremely important. Not just, you know, new changes, but, you know, even existing changes to sort of kind of go back and look what they did. The Philadelphia situation, for instance.
Tight end coach,
yeah. So understanding like that Philly has new head coach and new offensive coordinator sometimes just gets overlooked. Like we're aware of it, but we haven't really processed it. And so we're sort of kind of projecting a lot of these players to basically do the same things that they've done in the past. You know, the whole Miles Sanders debate, you know, the head coach, their OC both came from systems where they used, you know,
the coach.
I don't want to say running back by committee, but they used specialized backs. They had a back that was sort of kind of first and second down, and they also had a pass catching back, and they would sort of kind of use them in various situations. So are they going to incorporate that? Well, that's the head coach and the OC. So I got to assume, based off of their history, based off of how they drafted, based off of sort of kind of the player personnel, that's something that we got to consider. So when I look at Miles Sanders, I'm going to be concerned personally that he may not catch as many passes as he did in the past, especially since he had an issue with the drop rates and what he had last year. And that may have been a fluke. I don't necessarily think that he's a bad pass catcher, but I think it's something that you got to consider. I think it's, you know, it can kind of get you that leg up over the field when it comes to drafting.
The only reason, as far as Miles Sanders, the only reason why I kind of like him this year, honestly, is because of where he was going last year. He was going in the first.
Yeah.
Early second last year, and this year you're able to get him in like the late third.
Yeah.
So I feel like the situation didn't change too much. Yeah, they changed their coach, but he's still the lead back.
Yeah.
Another thing I look at a lot, and he knows this. I look at contracts all day long, like contract. Yeah. And he's in a contract year, so for me that tells me this is the year he's going to try to put his best effort forward because he's trying to secure that next contract. And if you look at past backs at their contract year, you'll see they actually have pretty good seasons.
Yeah.
So for me, Miles Sanders, I'm kind of looking at it as a discount at the moment. I'm not really in love with him as a player. I never have been, honestly.
Yeah. He was completely off the Miles.
I hated him last year. Yeah, I hated him last year.
He's completely off the bandwagon. Yeah.
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
But again, now he's just going so late, and he's still the lead back. And in fantasy football, lead backs are so valuable.
Yeah.
You know, I just feel like he's.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll be able to get him as your third running back in some cases.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, he's young and athletic. That O-line's going to be a lot better.
A lot better.
They
were so injured last year.
You got to assume having a QB who has legs on him will sort of kind of keep defenses a little bit more
Help
honest.
Things out with the RPOs.
That usually helps out.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not sure where I'm at in terms of trust level on this head coaching scheme, but I do like where they come from.
Yeah.
And I do like, you know, what I've seen from the places that they've been in Indy. I think based on the track record, I think that they should be able to sort of kind of get him in positions to succeed. And they also,
he does it or not.
and then like you like to hear things like, okay, we want to incorporate the screen game and things like that. And then again, even in a place like the Colts, like we saw Jonathan Taylor still, catch plenty of passes. So it's not like he's going to be an absolute zero. So I think you're right. I think the late third is probably a value and something that we may want to consider, because it's only a matter of time before we hear a quote coming from the head coach that, oh, we love Miles Sanders. We see him as a 3-down back.
What's going to happen?
Which absolutely means nothing.
Right.
Means absolutely nothing.
We have a whole episode on
it means absolutely nothing.
talk
But his
and
ADP
tweets
will
that,
shoot up. Yeah.
Man, we have a whole episode.
It's like DeAndre Swift right now. Like I feel like I've increased drafts to try and get as many like third round DeAndre Swift shares as I can. But which has been tough. But those things I think are
I'll tell
important.
you, the first preseason game when Miles Sanders busts out and goes like 60 yards, he's gonna be in the second.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what they do with preseason.
That's all it takes.
I don't know if we see starters playing preseason anymore, but that's a different take.
Well, let's talk about injuries, because I think that's probably why we won't see a lot of starters playing in preseason. Let's talk about injuries. I've been hesitant to take a real look at Saquon if I get one of those first 3 picks. Am I being foolish about it? How do you guys address players who were injured the prior year? Because it seems like, but you got Saquon coming off an injury. CMC is coming off an injury. Like, how do you guys address injuries from the prior season?
It has to be case by case. It has
100%.
to be case by case.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? Of course, one of the biggest things you're looking at is the timing of the injury.
Yep.
Like, when did they actually get injured? Because you have to see if the time they got injured, and then you have to see, has it been enough time for them to have really truly healed, or they may be trying to come back too early. And it's going to probably affect it. And then the type of injury, of course. Major factors. What type of injury they had. And is that going to be something that's going to hinder them for a longer period of time? Me personally, I feel like if a team has expressed confidence and you're not seeing things where it's like they're trying to take it slow, or, he's off on the side. If they're not saying stuff like that, if it's been like everything back to normal from the team, then I'm more confident in taking a guy where I feel like I can take it. And if you look at Barkley last year at this time, he was going number 2 overall. In some cases, number 1. So again, the kind of same thing I'm saying with Miles Sanders. If last year he was going number 1 or number 2, and this year he's going like 4 or 5, I think I got him in 6. My first draft this year, I got him in 6, like overall 6th pick. I'm gonna take him.
Yeah,
I'm gonna take. I mean, because remember in FFPC, this is a tournament where you're trying to become number 1, trying to be at the top. Like, this guy's been at the top twice. You can't approach this with this, I got to be cautious. Because cautious isn't going to get you at the top. Cautious is going to probably get you top 100, top 150, top 200. You're not trying to get there. You're trying to get to the top. And to get to the top, you have to have the best, maybe not the best players, but you have the most amount of fantasy points when everything's all said and done. So you're not trying to get somebody that can probably give you a ceiling of maybe 20 points. You're trying to get somebody like can get you 30, 40 points. And that's something Barkley can do. Yeah. So I'm not just going to let him ride just because I'm scared of you might get hurt.
Yeah. I think for me, so that question, I think we got to answer in multiple ways. So I'm going to kind of step back. I think there are certain aspects of fantasy football that we have quite a room to grow. And I think one of those is injury-related news, because none of us are really experts when it comes to these particular types of injuries. And I think we don't do a good enough job of sort of kind of really diving in to the type of injury. We can say ACL, but ACL means a lot of different things. And this coming from a person who's had 2 different ACL repairs. That can mean a lot of different things in the timetable and the recovery, and, how that player may, sort of kind of recover in that, that year is going to be very different. If you had a simple ACL or just a clean ACL tear, nothing else, then you're likely to recover without any issue. 7 months, you're probably good to go. If it was a little bit more complex, depending on your body type, depending on, athletic build, that can be a struggle. And then we may see some compensatory issues. We kind of saw that with Dalvin Cook. He's had some prior leg issues in the past. I think he had 2 ACLs, if I wasn't correct. But when he had his most recent ACL, we saw that he was having hamstring issues afterwards. And I think if you kind of followed some of the more, savvy injury-related fantasy docs, physical therapists, or anyone really kind of in that field who's sort of kind of in the know, they'll tell you that there's a high risk of that. There's a high risk of having a hamstring or some type of compensatory injury. So I think us as a fantasy community, we got to be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to some of this fanciness. So I think other thing is like strength of schedule, and we'll talk about that later. But I think there's certain parts of fantasy football that we just sort of kind of just like gloss over or just like take it kind of face value or really don't dive into. So when it comes to Saquon specifically, based off of the experts that I've sort of kind of have followed or talking to specifically in this field, I feel very comfortable giving the timing of the injury, giving the specific type of injury, the type of surgery he had. I think he allowed some time for his MCL to recover, and then he had an ACL, and just sort of kind of giving that he's an athletic freak. I feel more than comfortable taking him early on. And there are very few players, in my personal opinion, that can be number one overall, excluding quarterbacks. It's CMC and it's Saquon Barkley, and that's it. Wow. Dalvin Cook we've seen a lot of great seasons out of Dalvin Cook. Yeah. But if everybody stays healthy, he'll be top 3, top 4, top 5. But will he be top 1? We haven't seen it. Right. But we've seen that 400-point plus season from CMC. And Saquon has that because he's one of the few backs that's a workhorse back with not much behind him.
Do it too.
Potentially, but he's got to have some ridiculous games. Yeah. Having that 5 TD game,
and more volume.
Yeah, and more volume. Yeah. Barkley's one of the few players that you can get 280 plus carries, close to 300 carries, get 70 to 80 catches, and easily put up double digit touchdowns. So getting him at 6, 7, I mean, it is lock button. It is lock button. I'm trying to get as much Saquon Barkley.
Honestly, he shouldn't even be falling.
Yeah, I want to get as much Saquon Barkley. And the line has improved too. I mean, they didn't do a lot, but I felt this is, to me, reminds me of the Rams situation last year. Last year when we were talking about the Rams, I was big on Akers because of the player, but I was, part of that, kind of argument was that, well, I think, the O-line is going to have time to gel, and even though they, graded out poorly the year before, I think the continuity and just that coach in itself, I think they're going to figure it out. And I felt like that running back fit that specific type of run scheme, and that ended up kind of coming to fruition. And so Saquon's kind of a different type of back. I don't think he definitely has some deficiencies in terms of sort of kind of vision and maybe patience and things like that. But that O-line to me is something that is seeing continuity and maybe gelling. And then you add in the Galladay, another year in the offensive system. Hopefully Daniel Jones takes that next step. The defense to me is good enough.
Not only that, but
and actually above average.
Look at his replacement, how well Gallman actually did pretty well.
Yeah.
So if Gallman can do that well, because remember they were as a new coach last year, so it's not like we were going to see the same type of system Saquon was in before. We were going to see a new system, and Gallman was actually producing enough to where he got a contract from another team this year. So if Gallman can do that well, I think Saquon can dwarf that.
Yeah.
Now, how much of your belief in these medical reports are from you guys having being doctors and being able to review
look, I'm an optometrist, so I do the eyes. So whenever, honestly, any injury reports, I always kind of reach out to them like, what do you think about this? What I'm saying?
And then what I do, because I'm ENT and I do mostly sinus and endoscopic, I reach out to my ortho friends, or literally my physical therapist friends. Shout out to Carlos Reyes, who may be working with the Cowboys fairly soon here, but. I reach out to them because I think you want both, not just an orthopedic, but you also want a physical therapist, because there's two aspects of this. And I only know this because I went through 2 ACLs myself. The orthopedic is the one who sort of kind of diagnosed the injury and patched me up. The physical therapist is the one who sort of kind of got me to a point where I can get back to playing basketball again, rehabilitation. They sort of kind of walk you throughout the entire process. I maybe saw my ortho a handful of times afterwards, but really it was the physical therapist who was like, okay, you're at 85%, now let's work on this. Okay, you seem to have, good cutting, but we need to, focus a little bit more on your quad muscle. Or your quad tendon is looking a little bit weak, let's focus on this therapy right here. So they have sort of kind of a very unique perspective on return to play that I think we have to focus on. And there's a couple on Twitter that I follow that I think are just absolutely excellent.
Want to shout them out?
We will. Okay. We're gonna shut them out.
We'll put them in the notes.
I don't have their handle in front of me
you.
specifically, but I promise we'll shout that out.
Get that to you.
Yeah, just DM me or I'll shout them out on Twitter. Yeah, I think I have in the past, but some of them just do absolutely excellent work. And the best thing that I love about it is that they come with analytics. They come with prior clinical studies, clinical data, and they're very upfront. They'll let you know that it's hard to extrapolate this, but given the data that we have, we can anticipate this. And so it's that next level. Again, getting back to strength of schedule, because I do want to have that debate.
We can start it now.
We can kind of say, historically it's been hard to sort of kind of assess, or just throw all ACLs into one bucket and say, this is. But it's really not that simple. And so you can do that and kind of lose a little bit. Mm-hmm. Or you can really dive in and get a good understanding, because there are certain situations that I want to know about. Like I reached out to Dr. Reyes regarding Ben Roethlisberger's shoulder, mm-hmm. Not shoulder, his shoulder or elbow. His elbow, and the type of procedure that he had. Was it a Tommy John? Was it Tommy John-like? And I mean, the detail and specifics that he went into in terms of just sort of kind of the actual injury and the repair, and then sort of kind of what to anticipate, was, second to none. And so that allows me to sort of kind of know that, okay, that injury is likely something that's not to linger. So either Roethlisberger has completely lost it, or maybe it was just his first year back and he was taking it kind of easy. But that, to me, kind of opens up the idea, okay, maybe Roethlisberger has a little bit more in the tank. Maybe he can throw the ball deep, because at times I saw him throw the ball deep. Right. But we also saw him not leave the pocket whatsoever and get the ball out very quickly. I think he just didn't want to get hit. So the way that I sort of kind of then apply that to fantasy is, okay, if they're able to extend the field, because they have a Claypool, they have a Deontay Johnson, even a Juju, if they're able to extend the field, what does that do? That opens up the offense. That takes this poorly graded O-line, and we had a huge discussion on the Steelers offensive line today.
Which is trash, but go ahead.
Again, one of those situations where, you say they lost Pouncey, but Pouncey was a terrible run blocker last year. But that takes one of those situations where now it takes pressure off of the Steelers O-line, okay, because now we've extended the field. Defenses now have to be concerned about getting beat over the top. So guess what that does to a player like Najee Harris? Right. So you can take, an injury to the quarterback, dive deep in, and now that increases the realm of possibilities of these other players. So now before, when I was under the mindset, okay, Ben's is toast, he's done. There's no way he can, throw the ball down the field. I'm not even touching Claypool. I don't want to touch Najee, because he's going to be seeing 8+ guys in the box. Now my realm of possibility has been open, and I've been able to sort of kind of, look at all the, potential outcomes for Ben Roethlisberger in the Steelers offense.
Okay, so you think that Pouncey leaving is a big deal?
Yes. Well, I think, because Pouncey, I strongly feel was the leader of that offensive line for several years, probably since he was a rookie. Mm-hmm. Pro Bowl player, very respected, not only on his team, but in the league. Him and his brother, Marquise Pouncey. So I feel like him leaving is going to have a what's the word where they had this continuation of having the same people on the
just
same
continuity.
Team. Continuity, yeah, like they're gonna lose continuity this next season, and that's with the fact that last year they were a bad offensive line. Yeah. So they're a bad offensive line, and then they're losing who some would consider probably as their best offensive lineman, who was the one. Keep in mind, the center calls the checks at the line of scrimmage. The center stands there, looks at the defense, and basically tells the offensive line what they're going to do if they need to make any audibles or adjustments. You're basically taking that player away that's been in that position for so many years and replacing them with, I don't even know who they're replacing with, and I should probably look that up. But it's not a known
third,
name.
Fourth round.
Yeah, I hope it's not that rookie, because they were really in trouble. You know what I'm saying? Like I know they drafted a center in the third round, but I'm hoping.
He was highly graded coming out. So
yeah, but if he's a rookie, he's still gonna have some growing pain. He's never seen NFL defenses like he's gonna see them. So I don't know what they're doing there. And when you run the most successful running teams are able to run straight up the middle, and you lose your center. You know what I'm saying? Again, I don't know who's replacing with. Already a bad offensive line. They lost Villanueva to the Ravens. I really don't even know who else they lost. They probably have lost somebody else, or they probably replaced.
They're getting back Zach Banner.
Okay, that'll help. I mean, I got to look it up.
So for me, number one, I think the offensive scheme last year was just terrible. Whether it was Ben calling his own plays and sort of kind of taking control of the play calling, or whether it was Fickner, or whether it was the O-line itself, they did a decent job at pass blocking. Actually, a very good job at pass blocking. Part of that was because the ball got out quickly, but they did okay with that. But they were dead last in run blocking. Mm-hmm. And Pouncey was one of the main reasons behind that. So to me, losing him is just going to be a positive. Ideally you're replacing him with someone who's better, but he graded out extremely poorly when it came to run blocking. Same thing Villanueva. I think he was probably one of their better run blockers, but he was still very, very poor. So I think the turnover at the offensive line, it's not ideal in any scenario. You definitely want your offensive line to gel, but I think, sort of kind of bringing in new talent. But to me, it's really bringing in a new offensive coordinator, new coach for that offensive line. I think that's going to be significant.
With this in mind, who from the Steelers would be the front runner to make it? The answer is the rookie.
Yeah. Well, it can't get any worse. He literally graded out as one of the worst
I guess it
run
can't
blocking
be any
centers.
worse, but
So I think when we get, hopefully Matt Canada comes in and just listening to him talk, seeing what he sort of kind of put out in the media, it seems that they're coming with a very different philosophy. And so I think this is a situation where coaching can make a significant improvement. We don't need them to be top 5, top 10. You don't, okay? There are plenty of running backs who run behind very bad O-lines who succeed, okay? I just need them to not be as poor as they did. I need to not watch a Steelers game and think, just don't run. There's just no point, It was atrocious last year. So to me, some of that can be addressed with coaching. You can't be that bad. That, and again, we're going to get to it, their strength of schedule. You can't. I just don't think you can ignore it.
How do you address strength of schedule when you're drafting players when you're approaching the season?
So I'll tell you mine. I'm in the minority by far, definitely compared to everybody I see online and on Twitter. But I really totally disregard strength of schedule.
I think you're in the majority. I think that's what everybody does.
Really? I think most people look at strength of schedule.
I think they put out strength of schedules, but I think everybody's take on it is like, oh, we can't.
Well, good. Then there's smart people out there. But the way I see it, I think strength of schedule is all due to past or historical information that I think is irrelevant going forward. You know what I'm saying? I feel like, okay, and I can get to certain examples, but I feel like you say, okay, this team is about to play, I don't know, let's say the Browns, okay? So last year, right, teams that had the Browns on the schedule, when people saw their strength of schedule, they probably saw the Browns as being trash. Like, this is a bad team. Like, when you play the Browns, you're going to smash them because historically the Browns have been bad. But what did we see last year? The Browns were a good team, a very good team, a playoff Super Bowl contending team. So all those statistics or all those people that were looking at the schedule prior and saying when we see the Browns, we're going to be able to beat them or they're a poor team, it was totally false information they used to come to that conclusion. And I feel like that's the problem that happens every single year. You'll see in a lot of cases teams that are high in the draft order as far as the NFL draft. Like a couple years back, I think the 49ers were drafted number 2 when they took Nick Bosa. That they ended up going to the Super Bowl the next year, right? So they went from being one of the, if not the second worst team in the NFL, to the next year being a team that goes to the Super Bowl. So how are you going to look at the information from that prior year and have that determine what's going to happen the upcoming year? I feel like that's the problem we deal with.
So I completely agree with that take on strength of schedule. I think if that's what you're doing, if that is how you were sort of kind of addressing strength of schedule, you're taking old data from 2020 and using that for 2021 and saying, okay, you ranked 31st, so you were the worst defense in the league.
But how else would people determine strength of schedule?
But I think that's, this is not to come off condescending because I'm not saying that I'm perfect at doing this, but I think it's lazy. I think it's lazy to just not take into account, like, what one defense that I'm like very high on this year that was garbage last year.
You like, I don't know, you like the Steelers, you like the Broncos?
Broncos.
Yeah.
Okay? The Broncos were bad last year.
I agree.
If we take that from last year, but I don't do that. I look at
Who they added. Yeah.
I look at their current roster.
Right.
They are going to be a force.
I totally agree.
As far as the pass defense, they are going to be very hard to contend.
I totally agree. They added
Calhoun to Simmons,
Kyle Fuller.
Yes.
They added Patrick Surtain in the draft. I totally agree.
So I think you have to approach that with each team and try to figure out. So I would rather take the approach of let me try to figure out which of these defense and this is what I do with strength of schedule. I just look at the extremes. Everything in between does not matter. And then it's dependent on the player in terms of whether or not it's going to move. It rarely ever moves someone like a full round or something.
But I think the way, from what you're saying now, the way you approach strength of schedule is different than the way everybody else has approached strength of schedule.
And that's what I'm saying.
Everybody else takes strength of schedule like literally this team was ranked this way. So when you're calculating, because they literally have numbers to this, the strength of schedule, you're going to get the 5th easiest schedule next year. How do you know they're the 5th easiest schedule? You're going from 2020 data? That's not.
And there's multiple aspects of this too, because total team defense is absolutely irrelevant. Like total team defenses mean nothing. You literally have to break it down into pass defense and rush defense. And then even in pass defense, you kind of have to understand, like if I'm drafting, a slot wide receiver versus an X wide receiver, any given week, the opposing defense may have a very good
outside corner
versus exactly. So those things are important. That's kind of more into play. So for me, it's less from a wide receiver standpoint. But this is where, to me, I think I utilize it. And granted, I understand that injuries happen and that trying to figure out what's going to happen in week 15,
that's why I don't like projections. But
it's very tough. But when I see a team on the schedule that plays a Washington football team twice, I'm less likely to draft that running back compared to somebody I have in that same tier that may be playing Cincinnati and or someone else. So that to me is where it's relevant. So I look at at this point I pretty much know who's playing who. I know who has, at least in my mind, a perceived easier schedule. And again, I'm just looking at the extremes.
Right. But okay, you made a good point. Washington last year at this time, nobody looked at the Redskins as being a great defense.
I thought they were going to have a very good defense. I thought that their D-line was very good.
You might have. But nobody was saying, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear anybody saying, oh, they're going to deal with the Redskins. You got to watch the running back you're playing. Like, I never heard that. So, now, everybody's like, the Redskins defense is top notch.
But what's changed with the Redskins defenses?
Since last year?
Yeah. Nothing, yeah. Experience.
Shoot, actually, they got worse because they lost Ryan Kerrigan.
Okay, they did lose.
So they lost somebody.
They did lose Kerrigan.
But what I'm saying is the narrative behind them is different now
compared
to last year. But they were great last year.
Yeah.
So people were entering the season like not really caring about them.
And I think you can't do that. I think you have to go roster by roster.
So when I talk about strength of schedule, that's what I'm against. Yeah. Because I feel like people use that crutch and just say, "Hey, you're dealing with the easiest schedule this year because of historical data," and they just say, And you said the term that we use a lot, laziness. Yeah. People are so lazy with how they do their fantasy football studying. They'll look at that like, okay, this has the easiest schedule in the season. Okay, bam, move on to the next year. When instead they're not doing what you're saying you do, you actually dive into like what makes this team good. Like where did they improve at? Are they really better at this or are they actually worse? Yeah. When you change coaches, you change philosophy.
Yeah, and that's a big thing.
From a running team to a passing team in 1 year. Yeah. But historically, you could say, like the Falcons, we could say for the last 5 years, they've been a passing team. This year, they might decide, hey, Mike Davis, here, 30 runs a game.
The Eagles are like that, too. They change defensive coordinators, and I have no idea how good their defense is going to be. So I can't look at that as a good or bad matchup.
So really, that's why I've always been against strength of schedule. Yeah. Because I feel like it's information. And then another thing is I feel like teams evolve throughout the season. A team can be really bad at one thing in the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, they'll be great at it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But, I mean.
Yeah. And and like I said, it's player dependent because obviously, strength of schedule, we're applying to drafting and ADP. So when I'm like looking at CMC, I could care less about the schedule, even if it's a bye week in the playoffs. Yeah. Like things like that. But when it comes to certain players like Miles Sanders, I'm looking at Miles Sanders and Allen Robinson, and I'm like, man, I already have 2 running backs. Do I really, and I'm playing in a large field tournament. Do I really want to be up against Miles Sanders and all the question marks that he has going up against the Washington football team the last 2 weeks of the season? Based on the information that I have now, probably not. But if I went 0 RB and Miles Sanders is staring me there in the late third round and I need a running back, then I'm going to take him. So I think, to me, I just think it's something that we can't just completely gloss over, or at least I prefer not to completely gloss over, to pay some attention to. And the other thing, too, is I'll get to this is my last point on straight to schedule when it kind of comes to overall schedule, because I think you have to be very specific when you talk about strength of schedules. But when it comes to overall schedules, sometimes it's at an advantage. I want my teams in competitive games or in shootouts.
Right.
Which is why I like the Pittsburgh Steelers this year.
I made a point about that yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Somebody playing the number one team schedule because they're going to have to play better teams.
Yeah.
Better teams, but they're going to have to. Who was I saying that about? I don't even remember. I think it was the Steelers.
Titans.
Yeah, it was the Titans. We were talking about AJ Brown.
Yeah.
I was like, they're gonna play against.
That's great for AJ Brown. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna play against division winners from last year, so they're gonna play against teams that are most likely to score a lot more points, which means their offense is gonna have to score more points to stay with the other team. So it actually ends up benefiting him because he's playing better teams.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with that. But again, not a lot of people dig deep into things like this. They just look at it as this is the number. Like Roto World, I'm not knocking Roto World, great website. But I see them kind of their tweets, this is the list of the top 10 quarterbacks, and this is their ranking of their schedule for this year, and that's it.
Yeah.
With no content.
Yeah.
And people look at that and they take that as gospel.
Yeah.
But you can't do that, so it makes you lazy. So that's kind of the problem I have.
Yeah. How early are you guys taking defenses, though? I care about the nuts and bolts things. Yes, like in drafts. how early are you taking?
It's funny. When I started drafting, I would take defenses early, like 14th round. I think maybe as early as the 13th round. And sometimes I'd take multiple defenses. I will say that, I don't want to say that was the wrong technique. Probably it was too early. Maybe 15th round would be the earliest.
First of all, let's. I don't know if we've explained there is 20 rounds in the FFPC.
Yeah.
So for context, go ahead though.
But what I would say is that in the years prior, I felt that there were certain defenses that I think were head and shoulders above the rest.
Yeah,
I felt, 2 years ago, I felt like New England Patriots were an elite defense. So I had multiple defenses, or multiple Patriot defenses.
Last year was the Steelers.
And last year it was the Steelers, and to some degree the 49ers. And we saw what happened with those injuries happened. But before injuries, Steelers, they were that defense. I was trying to get them everywhere. So it's it goes back to that, sort of kind of, I don't want to say lazy analysis, but it's a little bit lazy to say, oh, defenses and kickers don't matter. Just take them at the end. Maybe kickers don't matter, but defenses don't matter. Just take them at the end. I disagree. If you feel like there's one defense head and shoulders above the rest, then go for that defense. This year, I personally don't feel that there's necessarily one, and I feel that there are a lot of sleeper defenses. And when I look at the schedules and I take into account the defenses, I don't necessarily see a huge advantage in getting one over the other. So this year, I basically been drafting one defense and been drafting them very late in the 19th to 20th round.
So the way, and I've kind of been observing the way he's been drafting. Like he says, he's kind of had this strong belief in a certain defense, and he hasn't taken them early. And when I say early, I think I've been seeing him drafting around 15, maybe 16.
Yeah.
He'll take it, he'll target, I need to get this defense, and then kind of be comfortable with it there. Me, I've kind of had the approach of I want to get a late defense, and the reason being is I tend to stream my defenses very strongly. And if you don't know what streaming means, it basically is you pick up a defense for that week because you're looking at the matchup and you think they're going to do well against that matchup. So you're utilizing them for that week or the week after, but then you don't hold on to them. You replace them with another defense you feel like might have a good matchup later. So I tend to stream a lot. But really my technique has been to stream early, then locate the great defense of that season. Because I feel like every season, some kind of dark horse defense or two kind of arises. You know what I'm saying? And they end up being a great defense throughout the season. Last year, it was Redskins and probably another team. I'm saying Redskins, I'm sorry. Washington football team. And maybe another defense I'm just kind of slipping my mind. The year before that was the Steelers, because the Steelers didn't start off great. The Steelers started off kind of okay, but then they added Minka Fitzpatrick, and it took them through the roof, So I kind of try to hurry up and search for that defense. I think last year was also the Rams. But I try to hurry up and find that defense and then hold on to them. And that's my defense throughout the season. But I've kind of been slightly taking his approach this year. I guess I can just say the defenses. I do like the Broncos. I do like the Steelers again. Let's What's another team? I like the Redskins. I like those 3 teams, defense-wise. So I'll probably take those teams early, defense-wise. But in reality, if I can, I would still want to wait because I still want to – because I feel like I understand I'm not psychic or smart enough or wise enough to know who the best defense is going to be this year. I understand, like, I have this blind spot in my ability to figure it out on the front end. So my goal is to just get a defense, hurry up and figure out who they are, and then grab them. You know, so that's kind of what I want to do.
49ers are another team. I think they will have a big bounce back. I think Bosa's going to come
They might, because they're getting a lot of players back.
But the other thing with defenses, too, especially, you know, in a 20 roster, in 20-round draft, I think it's important to kind of understand that, like, a lot of those late-round picks are just dart throws, okay? And so every draft is dependent. So if I'm looking at guys that I think, you know, are just, like, absolute steals, I'm passing on defense, you know? But if I feel like, okay, you know,
dime a dozen type
players or players that, like, I'm high on, but I know the field is, like,
they're not even going to draft.
They're not even considered. You know, me drafting them makes me look like absolutely insane. Like, you know who I'm talking about. Then, like, I'll just, like, wait. You know, I'll wait, or maybe I'll draft. I'll get my defense and then just draft those guys afterwards, because I know that they'll be there. I know the field is not yet caught up to them, or their ADP.
That's the advantage of studying draft boards too. Yeah, like you can be high on a player, you can have this conviction like this player is going to be great. The system is great. They're going to get the opportunity. But if you're looking at these draft boards and you're seeing other people aren't on the same vibe that you're on or the same wavelength, and you're seeing this guy's getting drafted super late or not drafted at all, you shouldn't get in there and say, well, I still believe this player is going to be great. Let me draft him early. No. You understand the value of that player. It can be taken at a different time. You can give value somewhere else early and then come back and give value later, you know?
I said, God, give me a warning. Please take me for the morning so I leave more disappointments than I ever will appointments. Give a fuck about your feelings, rub it in. This your ointment can't depend on the oinker. Find your pick in the blanket, find a stick. Through your anus, give a rib for your statement. This shit and the pavement that is on. Word is born, I've been on like a track phone. I ain't going back home. Say what I do, trick. Yeah, I think I'm taxed on. Go where I live, you gon' need a chaperone.